The 9,545th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is Security Council Resolutions 1160 of 1998, 1199 of 1998, 1203 of 1998, 1239 of 1999, and 1244 of 1999. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Serbia to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. On behalf of the Council, I welcome His Excellency Mr. Aleksandar Vučić, President of the Republic of Serbia, and I request the protocol officer to escort him to his seat at the Council table. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Caroline Ziadeh, Special Representative of the Secretary General and Head of the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I also invite Mr. Albin Kurti to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw to the attention of Council members to the document S/2024/134, a letter dated 5th February 2024 from the Permanent Representative of Serbia to the United Nations addressed to the President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to Ms. Caroline Ziadeh. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw to the attention of Council members to the document S/2024/134, a letter dated 5th February 2024 from the Permanent Representative of Serbia to the United Nations addressed to the President of the Security Council. I now give the floor to Ms. Caroline.
President, distinguished members of the Security Council, distinguished representatives, let me start by thanking you, Madam President, for this opportunity to brief the Council on the latest unfolding developments in Kosovo. Almost 1 year ago, 2 agreements were reached in Brussels on 27th of February and in Ohrid on 18th of March, setting forth a pathway toward negotiations and mutual engagement. However, with disagreement on the sequencing of the implementation, progress was stalled. Subsequent developments, such as the by-elections in 4 municipalities in northern Kosovo, resulting in mayors elected by barely 3.47% of eligible voters, the ensuing clashes around those municipality buildings on the 29th of May that resulted in significant injuries to civilians and to 93 KFOR personnel, and the serious security incident in Banjska on the 24th of September, still under investigation, that led to fatalities, were serious setbacks. Despite some positive momentum that re-emerged at the end of last year, with progress achieved over vehicle license plates, the energy roadmap, customs documentation, and the participation of the Kosovo Serbs in the initiation of the referendum to recall the mayors, unilateral actions on issues that clearly fall within the political dialogue process and its governing agreements are cause for great concern. Regardless which side takes them and what justifications are provided, and in the absence of unambiguous public communications, such actions predictably exacerbate an environment of insecurity and mistrust. Madam President, recently, on the 27th of December 2023, the Central Board of Kosovo adopted a regulation and announced that, as of 1st of February 2024, the only currency allowed for cash transactions in Kosovo will be the euro. Limited public explanation was offered, despite the fact that since 1999, the dinar has served as the de facto primary currency for cash and commercial transactions in Kosovo's Serb majority areas. Tens of thousands of individuals are affected, as is the economy, which depends upon their purchasing power. More specifically, the regulation interrupts the payment to individuals employed by Serbian-funded institutions in Kosovo, certain agricultural and social welfare subsidies, and recipients of pensions, small and medium-scale businesses, health and education services, including childcare, will also be severely affected, as they have for long also used to receive their funds from Serbia. This decision, particularly as related to the short deadline of its entry into force and the affected individuals' future access to basic economic and social services, became a matter of concern for local communities and international interlocutors. Subsequently, and in response to the obvious concerns this has raised, the Kosovo authorities on the 6th of February announced a transitional period of 1 month for implementation, accompanied by a communications campaign. Yet, not all concerns seems to be addressed regarding the cash flow in dinars, as a cash transfer truck was prevented entry into Kosovo on the 7th of February, while 4 million dinars confiscated by the Kosovo police on the 3rd of February in Pejapeć municipality still awaits judicial and administrative actions. Madam President, as highlighted by many international partners, such issues under the Brussels Agreement in 2013 and 2015, in which the association community of Serb majority municipalities in Kosovo was decided upon. I would like to reiterate, Madam President, that actions, regardless of their legality and justification, must take into consideration their impact on affected population. Otherwise, such actions not only increase tensions, but also weaken the potential for lasting peace and security across all communities in Kosovo. In the spirit of conflict prevention, more should be done to win the hearts and minds of non-majority communities. Madam President, on 26th of January and 2nd of February, Kosovo police conducted operations targeting facilities used by the Serbian non-majority communities in the municipalities of Dragaš, Pejapeć, Kline Klina, and Istok Istok, as well as a community health center in Pristina. The Kosovo police announced that in all 4 municipal locations, various documents were seized, buildings were sealed, staff were taken into custody for questioning and later released. Also, during an earlier police operation in Pejapeć on the 2nd of January, a team of journalists from Goraž Devac the only Kosovo-Serbian media outlet in that region, reported being stopped and searched, despite having presented valid press credentials. As you know, Madam President, UNMIK and our main partners place the highest importance upon ensuring the freedom of the media and the freedom of expression at all times. Madam President, neither the Central Bank of Kosovo's news regulations nor these recent Kosovo police operations have contributed to de-escalation as repeatedly called for by international interlocutors. In that regard, I cannot overstate the critical deterrent role KFOR continues to play on the ground today. Madam President, in all my statements, including the latest on the 6th of February, I reaffirm the importance of upholding the rule of law, free from political influence, and also reiterated that all related actions must be anchored in the principles of human rights. I will continue to call on both Pristina and Belgrade to engage actively and in good faith in the EU-facilitated dialogue as the venue for tackling the most sensitive policy issues that affect the communities. It is crucial that efforts towards negotiated and mutually accepted solutions do not falter. Continuous effort to build greater mutual trust and respect are the only viable path to stability, prosperity, and security. Madam President, history has repeatedly shown that just solutions do not emerge from unilateral actions, but rather from a sustained and painstaking commitment to open communication and dialogue. We will continue our efforts to encourage all stakeholders to prioritize trust and building it, not only at the grassroots level, but at all levels, including between communities and institutions. Trust develops only in an atmosphere that fosters mutual respect, open communication, fairness, and both the perception and the reality of equal treatment. In closing, let us remember again that the only acceptable path ahead is one that is grounded in dialogue and compromise, embraces human rights, and ensures the equitable application of the rule of law. I can assure you, Madam President, that UNMIK remains committed to providing good officers towards this ultimate goal. And I thank you for your attention.
I thank Ms. Ziadeh for her briefing, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Alexander Vučić, President of the Republic of Serbia.
Dear Madam President of the Security Council, distinguished members of the delegations, I extend my deep appreciation to the Security Council for the quick convening of this session. It has paramount importance, and it is truly necessary because of the ongoing situation in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija, which is absolutely contrary to the UN Charter and relevant Security Council resolutions. In concrete terms, the provisional institutions of self-government in Pristina have created in the respective territory the unbearable living conditions for Serbs, and they are now carrying out widespread systematic attacks against Serb civilians, as well as their persecution. Such a situation, in the absence of appropriate reaction, could cause irreparable harm to the survival of the Serbian people in Kosovo and Metohija. At a Security Council session dedicated to the 6-month UNMIK report, the Republic of Serbia regularly informs this Council and the international public of the ongoing situation, and particularly of the very difficult position of Serbian and other non-Albanian population in Kosovo and Metohija. The Republic of Serbia asked for this extraordinary session of the Security Council precisely because current events and Pristina's activities are of such nature that they can cause the irreparable harm also into period until the convening of the session that would be dedicated to the 6-month ONMIC report. Direct occasion for which we asked for this session is recent move of the so-called Kosovo Central Bank, by which payment transactions with the Serbian currency dinar is banned in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija as of 1st February. Having done this, the so-called leadership's continuous set of attacks against Serbs and other non-Albanian population in Kosovo and Metohija culminated being that their survival in the territory of southern Serbian province depends to a large extent directly on dinar assets coming first and foremost from the budget of the Republic of Serbia. Data that the Republic of Serbia pays 60,946 salaries and pensions from its budget in dinars, 2,430 student tuitions, and that it finances soup kitchens that meet basic needs of approximately 2,000 socially most vulnerable citizens, illustrate that this measure is an attack, first of all against the Serbian population, and that it makes the situation in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija difficult. These numbers alone clearly demonstrate that the huge number of people in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija directly or indirectly depend on dinar incomes from the budget of the Republic of Serbia. Due to that, it is obvious that the ban of dinar payment transactions, i.e. decision to abolish dinar as the legal tender, deprives directly huge number of people of their basic personal means of living. Additionally, one should have in mind that around 6,794 Serbian and non-Albanian farms in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija depend directly on dinar subsidies from the Republic of Serbia, while the survival of 922 business entities owned by the Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija, which are directly dependent of dinar payment transactions, is no longer operationally viable or possible. To sum up, with a decision to ban dinar payment transactions, Prishtina's regime directly disables any operation of all medical, educational, social, cultural, and other institutions that enable Serbs to provide themselves and their families with basic provisions, to have education, to get medical treatment, buy medications, and do everything that is considered to be ordinary life with a minimum of human dignity. Precisely, these institutions are the basis for establishment of the community of Serb-majority municipalities, whose competencies and structure are clearly defined in the Agreement on General Principles signed in 2015. Article 17, Item D of this agreement defines clearly that Serbia has the right to finance this CSM, among other things, education and healthcare, within this agreed institutional framework of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo and Metohija. Any prevention of financing Serbian schools, kindergartens, faculties, hospitals, and infirmaries is a direct blow to both survival of Serbs and to the establishment of the CSM. However, it is obvious that precisely creation of unbearable living conditions and depriving the Serbs of the possibility of survival is the only objective of the regime in Pristina, which through the respective act of structural violence intensifies years-long, well-planned and systematic attack against Serbian population, and by which open persecution of Serbs from Kosovo and Metohija has begun. In that sense, I shall disfigure with facts the complete absence of any grounds of the argumentation of the regime in Pristina, claiming that the measure to abolish dinar and introduction of euro as the only legal tender has been taken solely with the purpose of providing alleged rule of law. Please bear in mind that the so-called Kosovo Albanian leadership uses the term rule of law solely to harm Serbs and Serbian Orthodox Church. It is so widespread and drastic, usual practice, that provisional institutions of self-government have been publicly and openly denying for 8 years to deliver on final decision of their own Supreme Court on giving back the land that is owned by the Serbian Orthodox monastery Visoki Dečani. If we have in mind that this is how Pristina refers to the implementation of the principle of rule of law in case of the UNESCO World Cultural Heritage, which is under 24/7 protection of KFOR and purely Albanian inhabited environment, and which is inhabited by the Serbian Orthodox Church monks, I believe it is clear what kind of conditions ordinary Serbian population is subjected to by Pristina, and they are also the subject of the so-called declarative protection of the Pristina's alleged rule of law. In the context of Pristina's so-called rule of law that the Serbs are subjected to, allow me to mention another illustrative example. So-called judiciary, which has been massively persecuting Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija and potential Serbian returnees under the false accusations of war and other crimes, simply made a decision that member of illegal so-called Kosovo security forces Azem Kurtaj, who on Christmas Eve 2023 had shot from his service gun Serb child Stefan Stojanovic, 11 years old, and his cousin Miloš, 21 years old, should be released pending trial, but not to defend himself from accusation for obvious attempted murder of a child, but for an offense that is equivalent to provoking public danger, like when someone, let's say, throws firecrackers for the New Year's Eve. In that regard, one must keep in mind that this is only one out of even 470 unpunished, technically motivated attacks against Serbs, Serbian Orthodox Church and their property since 2021, since the so-called Kosovo-Albania leadership is led by Albin Kurti, who is now at the forefront of persecution of Serbs. Among those incidents that have begun in 2021 are also dramatic cases of endless police beating-ups and harassments of Serbs, and even brutal and unprovoked shooting at Dragiša Galjak and 4 more Serbs, which Pristina regime did not find worthy of formal investigation. Just as a comparison, for the entire 9 years prior to Kurti's coming to power in 2021, there had been totally 669 registered such ethnically motivated attacks, which is an increase of 300%. So, Pristina's regime, which in the aforementioned way creates unbearable living conditions, places Serbs outside of the law and persecutes them, claims now that the decision on abolishing legal tender dinar was made in order to implement the rule of law. Even though this factual contradiction reveals that this is not about some even formal rule of law, but solely about the mechanism for finalizing the creation of unbearable living conditions for Serbs and for their persecution. I will point out to another indisputable fact. It seems indisputable that euro was introduced in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija as the only legal tender in an obviously illegal way, because it was done by the unilateral decision of the political leadership in Pristina. It is undisputable not only due to the fact that dinar is the legal tender in the Republic of Serbia, and therefore it cannot be banned in Kosovo and Metohija as the part of the territory of the Republic of Serbia, which is placed under international administration by UN Security Council Resolution 1244. This dangerous measure of the regime in Pristina was taken illegally also because euro is the legal international currency issued by the European Central Bank. Due to that, it is obvious that Pristina leadership resorted to illegal use of euro, which is said in publicly available information of the European Union and the European Central Bank, which says on its official web presentation that the so-called Kosovo quotation adopted the euro unilaterally in 2002 and have since used it as their de facto currency. This means that the euro is not legal tender there, but is treated as such by the population. Therefore, imposing the euro in this case was undeniably done not for the purpose of any rule of law, but without any legal basis and appropriate arrangements with the European Union, and only and exclusively for the purpose of completing the creation of unbearable living conditions for Serbs and their expulsion from Kosovo and Metohija. We emphasize once again that the decision to abolish the circulation of the dinar, i.e. the abolition of the dinar as a legal means of payment in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija, is only one in a series of planned, well-organized, long-implemented and systematic measures of Pristina which attack the Serbian population above all and whose ultimate goal is to finally create unbearable living conditions and expel Serbs from the territory. The difficult situation in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija, especially the position of the Serb population, drastically deteriorated after the April elections in 4 municipalities in the north of Kosovo and Metohija. After the political representatives of the majority Serb population in those municipalities, due to increased repression and political disenfranchisement, left the provisional institutions of self-government at the request of their voters, additional pressures and attacks by Pristina on the Serbian people followed. With the constant structural and physical violence of armed formations composed almost exclusively of Albanians, Pristina, contrary to the will of the Serbs, called and held elections in these 4 municipalities. For clear and justified reason, the Serbs boycotted these elections. More than 97% of the inhabitants of the north of Kosovo and Metohija are Serbs, so only 0.029% of the total number of Serbs and only slightly more than 3% of the total number of registered voters turned out for these so-called elections. The elections were held in completely undemocratic conditions, and illegitimate Albanian mayors forcibly occupied local self-governments with the help of heavily armored personnel of the alleged special police, that is, members of very well-equipped Albanian armed formations. This was followed by the removal of the symbols of Serbia and displaying the designations of the so-called Kosovo. Serbs who until then worked in local self-governments were forbidden to access their workplaces, and the municipal facilities themselves were fenced off and surrounded by barbed wire. Such a situation led to peaceful protests by Serbs, to which Albanian armed groups responded by injuring more than 50 Serbs on 29th of May alone. In that course of events, there was also a tragic and reprehensible wounding of KFOR personal members that, for reasons incomprehensible to us, intentionally or unintentionally practically enabled the realization of Albin Kurti's goals. In those events, 4 Serbs were wounded from firearms, and 1 participant of the protest, Dragiša Galjak, was shot in the back from the automatic weapons. As we have already mentioned, no members of Prishtina's armed formations were processed for this violence against the Serbs. After the respective developments, the US Secretary of State, the EU High Representative Borrell, and NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg, as well as almost all international officials, were clearly and directly accusing Pristina of escalation in the ground. No doubt that was done by Russian, Chinese, and all the other officials that have never recognized Kosovo's independence. In spite of that, at the European Political Community meeting in Chisinau, I was asked to call the Serbs to sign the petition for replacement of Albanian mayors in Serb-majority municipalities in the north by President Macron and Chancellor Scholz. I told them not to push Serbs, who were under brutal repression, to sign the petition and not to humiliate them by them. I told them that the respective position made no sense, because it is obvious that nobody anywhere in Europe can be legally and legitimately in power if elected with 3% of votes of total numbers of voters. In this case, this is how Albanians were elected in environments where Serbs make 97% of population. Unfortunately, nobody wanted to listen to that and help ending Kurti's crimes. Instead of asking unconditional de-escalation from Pristina, they asked Serbs to unconditionally take part in new elections that Kurti had no intention of organizing and enabling. Additionally, they asked Serbia to lower the level of combat alert of armed forces and reduce the number of soldiers close to administrative line to the usual level, without being previously informed that in that moment there were even less Serbian soldiers than it usually was the case. We had almost immediately met the requests, while Pristina was allegedly sanctioned with the introduction of measures under which it is being equipped by modern weapons by those who imposed measures against it. In the first place, when we asked which international legal document envisages existence of any other armed formation in Kosovo and Metohija apart from KFOR, and according to which document they supply those illegal Albanian formations with weapons, the answer we get is that those who do the respective are powerful, that they recognize the so-called independence of Kosovo, that they do not care about the UN Security Council Resolution 1244 and the UN Charter, and that they can do whatever they please. Those who are supplying weapons to illegal armed formation of Kosovo Albanians do not stop talking about the territorial integrity of Ukraine. We don't mind that. But we do mind that in the place it is only the territorial integrity of the Republic of Serbia and Kosovo and Metohija that is not respected, and that is being undermined and violated, and the respective is explicitly guaranteed by the UN Security Council Resolution 1244 and the UN Charter. Due to all the aforementioned, it is logical that many months of Belgrade's efforts to find a solution to this problem in cooperation with the international community were not fruitful. Although it is a fact that the international community marked Pristina as the sole culprit for this escalation, Pristina basically did not face serious consequences for its actions. But the terror against the Serbian population has intensified, which includes, among other things, physical attacks on Serbs, the shutdown of their institutions and attacks on their property and the private property of the Serbian Orthodox Church. This is quantitatively confirmed by the data that in 2023, 179 ethnically motivated attacks on Serbs were recorded, while as many as 21 such attacks have already been recorded since the beginning of this year. This is a case of institutionalized physical and structural violence, which is accompanied by the incursions of Albanian armed groups into institutions financed by the Republic of Serbia and their shutdown, a tax on shipments of money intended for the payment of salaries, pensions, scholarships, and social benefits, then by arrests and harassment of healthcare and postal workers, who in a lawful and the same way as in the previous quarter of a century transparently try to deliver money to those whom it belongs, and also by many other acts of violence. I particularly emphasize that Pristina is viewing armed formations more and more openly and recklessly in carrying out the persecution of Serbs. Those formations are composed exclusively of Kosovo Albanians, and their existence on the territory of Kosovo and Metohija is undeniably illegal and contrary to the UN Security Council Resolution 1244. Since November 2022, various such armed formations have used illegal and disproportionate force against the Serbian population 98 times, of which 83 times in the area of the north of Kosovo and Metohija. Using the mechanisms of provisional institutions in the period since November 2022, they carried out 38 incursions into the north of Kosovo and Metohija, and with the illegal expropriation of land privately owned by Serbs and Serbian Orthodox Church, established a continuous presence in this area where Serbs make more than 97% of the population. Those armed groups also carry out arbitrary arrests of prominent Serbian individuals in that region and other known forms of physical and institutional violence against the Serbian population. Among other things, they carry out acts of mass intimidation of the Serbian population through, number one, obstructing the freedom of movement of Serbs through reasonless stops, humiliating treatment, beatings, and even other violent acts at illegally established armed checkpoints and all other locations in the entire north. Two, unjustifiably opening fire and the almost constant presence of armored fighting vehicles in peaceful urban areas. Three, illegal expropriation of land privately owned by Serbs, which they then used to build new military facilities in that area. Four, adopting decisions on confiscation of buildings owned by Serbian institutions which have been the owners of those facilities for more than 1 century. Five, the violent seizure of the property of the Serbian Orthodox Church, thus violating the special protection zones around the Serbian Orthodox Church facilities. Six, plowing and destruction of Serbian cemeteries. Seven, the imposition of an illegal embargo on Serbian goods and confiscation of legal goods owned by Serbian traders. Unfortunately, the list of illegal activities does not end there, and it is much longer when actions against Serbs in all other areas of Kosovo and Metohija, which they still inhabit, are included. As a reminder, according to Resolution 1244, armed groups of Albanians had to be demilitarized according to paragraph 9b, paragraph 15, and Article 6, Annex 1 of the UN Security Council Resolution 1244, which implies a ban on their reformation in one form or another. Providing them with modern military equipment is undoubtedly contrary to that resolution. The violence and persecution that Pristina is now openly carrying out against Serbs is a natural part of the long-term systematic and widespread attack on the Serbian civilian population throughout Kosovo and Metohija. In the past year alone, obviously due to the described physical and structural violence of Pristina institutions towards the Serbian population, more than 14% of Serbs left Kosovo and Metohija. It is tragic that Pristina is carrying out the aforementioned actions while at the same time, with the mediation of the EU, the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina has been in progress for many years, which the United Nations General Assembly in a resolution from 2010 designated as an instrument for strengthening security and cooperation, progress on the path to the EU, and improvement of people's lives. Its basic formal scope is certainly the first agreement of principles governing the normalization of relations dated 19th of April 2013, which obliged Pristina to establish the Community of Serb Municipalities. Its formation in accordance with the agreement from 2013 and 2015, which Pristina persistently refuses to implement, would create an atmosphere in which Serbs would have at least a chance for a dignified life and protection from persecution and violence. That is why, in the conditions of the ongoing persecution of Serbs, it became quite clear why Pristina refused to fulfill the obligation to form the Community of Serb Municipalities. Instead of creating conditions for the survival of Serbs in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija, we are witnessing well-planned, systematic, and widespread measures that deliberately create unbearable living conditions and persecute Serbs, thus rendering the physical survival of the Serb population on the territory of Kosovo and Metohija impossible. And what we speak about here is not about wonky dialogue, but full legalism from Pristina's side. The current situation in the territory of Kosovo and Metohija is of such nature that it undoubtedly leads to the deterioration of the situation, international friction, and the emergence of disputes that pose a threat to international peace and security, since the political leadership of the Kosovo Albanians carries out systematic and widespread attacks against the Serbian population. In order to respond in advance to today's already inappropriate calls for restraint and responsibility by both parties, which unfortunately has become a kind of mantra in the statements of international actors on the situation in Kosovo and Metohija, it seems necessary to point to the policy of the Republic of Serbia, which is based on UN Charter, and when it comes to the situation on the territory of Kosovo and Metohija, on the strict respect for the resolutions of the Security Council. Serbia opposes all factors of instability and strives to be a solid pillar of stability in the Western Balkans region. For years, Serbia has been attracting record amounts of foreign direct investments, greater than the rest of the region's countries combined. Serbia's development plans are very ambitious. In 2027, we will host the Expo exhibition, having a particular impact on the development strategy, which has been worked out in detail throughout plan with the colorful name Leap into the Future. The very fact that Serbia, as a responsible country and a constructive international actor, addressed the UN Security Council, refraining so far from any unilateral response to the actions of Pristina. I believe that it is not in anyone's interest that in a world where too many hotspots have already been opened, the Balkans will once again become a zone of instability due to the blind and senseless hatred of the Pristina regime towards the Serbs living in Kosovo and Metohija. I hope that after today's meeting, even those members of the UN Security Council who recognize the illegal unilaterally declared independence of the southern Serbian province will understand that Pristina's latest moves are not just an attempt to consolidate something that a significant majority of UN members, including Serbia, do not recognize as a state, but to endanger and violate the peace. Pristina's attempt to implement the abolition of dinar payment transactions and remove the dinar as a means of payment is nothing more than another in a series of acts of persecution and a systematic and widespread attack on the Serbian population, in one word, a crime against humanity. I also take this opportunity to thank to all of the officials from the United States and EU and all our traditional friends from the East for reacting to Pristina's latest escalating moves with statements of condemnation. However, the recent seizure in Pristina of money intended for pensions and social benefits for Serbs, as well as the arrest and criminal prosecution of people who transferred that money in a completely transparent and legal manner, as in all years during the past quarter of century, irrefutably proves that the statements given were clearly not enough means to persuade Pristina to immediately end the persecution of the Serbs and turn away from attempts to destabilize the region. I'm not even sure that the request of certain international actors to postpone the implementation of the regulation is the right way, because in that way Pristina is actually indirectly encouraged to continue making unilateral decisions with the technical procedural requirement that it just be more careful in choosing the moment and the manner of implementing those unilateral moves. The solution to this crisis, as well as to all other crises that Pristina has produced in the past period, can only be a clear order to immediately stop all the mentioned measures which deliberately create unbearable living conditions and carry out the persecution of Serbs, as well as decisive discouragement and preventing Pristina from resorting to any unilateral moves in the future concerning the Serbian people in Kosovo and Metohija. In this context, we ask the Security Council not to lose sight of the fact that in 2022 the Republic of Serbia, due to the described threat to the safety and survival of Serbs by armed Albanian formations, sent a request to the commander of KFOR that in accordance with Resolution 1244 and the military technical agreement from Kumanovo, enabled the return of the agreed number of Serbian security personnel who would assist international forces in protecting the Serbian population. Although the aforementioned international legal documents clearly provide for the obligation of the KFOR commander to enable such a return, this did not happen. The Republic of Serbia therefore calls on the Security Council, international organizations and countries that can influence the resolution of the crisis to take urgent and decisive measures with the aim of normalizing the situation in Kosovo and Metohija, preventing further persecution of Serbs, and creating conditions for the resumption of a meaningful dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina in accordance with the UN Charter and UN Security Council resolutions 1160, 1199, 1203, 1239, and 1244. The Republic of Serbia, for its part, will implement all agreements and undertake all necessary measures in accordance with the UN Charter and relevant resolutions of the UN Security Council. In closing, I want to thank all of you, dear representatives of the Security Council members, particularly those countries who strictly observe the UN Charter and the principles that international law is founded on, as well as all of you who showed readiness to listen to me and hear what Serbia has to say regarding the issue of Kosovo and Metohija and the necessity of protection of Serbian people from persecution carried out by provisional institutions of self-government in Pristina, which may bring to irreparable harm and that all of us together must avoid in the interest of preservation of life, peace and stability. Thank you, Madam President, once again.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Vučić for his statement, and I now give the floor to Mr. Albin Kurti.
Thank you, Madam President, distinguished members of the Security Council. There is a deep and uncomfortable irony and, frankly, a dystopian feeling in responding to false allegations of human rights abuses made by a country known to have committed the last genocide of the 20th century, and a government that is currently one of the biggest authoritarian threats to regional peace and security. This very Security Council established the ICTY in 1993 because of horrific crimes and grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions. The Serbian government throughout the 90s ordered, planned and committed murder, torture, mutilation and rape, committing genocide in Srebrenica and in Kosovo. Feminist legal scholars have extensively shown how rape was used as a tool of war. The brutality of what was committed changed international human rights law forever. Out of this misery, Kosovo emerged from the war as a symbol of the fight for dignity and the triumph of human rights. And we did not grow bitter. We have built ourselves into a forward-facing, multicultural and multi-ethnic republic, and a growing and robust democratic state. 16 years after independence and a quarter century after war and devastation, today we stand tall and proud. A republic for all, a multi-ethnic society of all. Our government's dedication to democracy, rule of law and human rights has bolstered both our economy and internal unity. Since the NATO intervention, we've actively engaged with numerous international allies to establish democratic and efficient institutions. In the last 3 years, our economy has surged, with 6.2% average growth, doubled foreign direct investments and exports, and a two-thirds rise in tax revenues without substantial fiscal policy change. We've funneled this growth into the region's largest fiscal package, recognized by the World Bank, to directly aid citizens, families and businesses in facing global energy and cost of living challenges. Kosovo is a success story of NATO intervention in the spring of 1999 and an inspiring lesson on how economic development and democratic progress can go hand in hand. This progress has been recognized by a number of international organizations. The 2023 Freedom House report ranks Kosovo first in the Western Balkans, second in Europe, and third globally for advancements in political rights and civil liberties. We improved by 22 places in just 2 years in the Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index. Similarly, we jumped 21 places in the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index since our government took office. Our growth and well-being are shared with minorities. We proudly have and enforce one of the constitutions with the highest protections of minority rights, which include 20 guaranteed seats in the parliament, out of 120, out of which 10 are for Serbs. For perspective, the entire population of Kosovo is approximately 1.8 million, and the Serbian community is about 4% of it. Serbs in Kosovo also run 10 out of 38 municipalities, so over 25% of them. We have made sure to allocate a substantial part of our budget to them and made sure that the Serbian language is an official language everywhere. We're actively working with the help of international governments and international NGOs to bolster these rights. Just last year, the Ministry for Communities and Returns, led by an ethnic Serb minister, allocated millions for 265 grants to NGOs, farmers, and small businesses from non-majority communities. The majority of these funds went to Kosovo Serbs. This month, we're launching a new initiative to support employment for up to 2,000 residents of the 4 northern municipalities. This effort will be facilitated by our newly established employment agency office at the municipality of Leposavić, a Serbian majority municipality. The Ministry of Finance Kosovo's Generation Unlimited program provides paid internships for youth, awarded also to the Kosovo Serb youth. Our energy efficiency program subsidizes energy-efficient home heating equipment, with 17% of subsidies benefiting non-majority communities, including Kosovo Serbs. We've allocated funds for building and repairing homes in Serb communities and provided an additional 5.6 million euros to Serb-majority municipalities this year. Education grants for these municipalities are over 20% higher per student compared to others. In the period of 2008-2022, the 10 Serb-majority municipalities enjoyed, on average, a 62% larger budget per capita than the rest of Kosovo. And for 2024, the Ministry for Communities and Returns has the largest budget increase of all ministries, apart from the Ministry for Culture, Youth and Sports, which has the investment for the Mediterranean Games 2030. The Office of Prime Minister press releases are in Albanian and in Serbian language all of the time. In addition, government meetings are also live streamed both in Albanian and Serbian. The idea that Kosovo is conducting an ethnic cleansing campaign or prosecution against the Serb community is a lie, one that has been debunked by numerous public bodies. Last October, the European Parliament approved a resolution calling on Serbian authorities and media to refrain from hate speech against Kosovars and the dissemination of propaganda about ethnic cleansing and pogroms in Kosovo. Last year, the Helsinki Committee for Human Rights detailed how the Serbian government intentionally spreads fear regarding the false endangerment of Serbs in Kosovo in order to radicalize society and to create a toxic atmosphere in which an agreement with Kosovo would be rejected. The false claims have also been disproven by the European Stability Initiative, a think tank based in Berlin and Vienna that obtained documents directly from official Serbian institutions. Their official statistics on state health insurance, enrollments in schools, pension recipients, the birth rates in hospitals prove that the percentage of Serbs leaving Kosovo corresponds to that of those leaving Serbia. Therefore, Serbs who leave Kosovo, just as those who leave Serbia, do so to pursue opportunities in Western Europe, not to flee some fictional ethnic cleansing campaign. Instead, let's focus on Serbia's treatment of its ethnic Albanian population today, an ethnic cleansing campaign carried out administratively. The Serbian government has systematically removed over 4,200 ethnic Albanians from the civil registry in Medveđa and over 2,000 in Bujanos. This erasure has tangible consequences. Victims lose access to IDs, passports, medical services, social assistance, vehicle registration, property transactions, pensions, and voting rights, leaving them stateless. This discriminatory targeting constitutes a method of depopulation against the Albanian community in Serbia. Ethnic Albanian citizens are far from being the only target of Serbia's authoritarian regime. On the 2nd of January of this year, The Guardian's editorial board described the state of politics there as state capture. A few hours ago, the European Parliament adopted with overwhelming majority a resolution calling for an investigation into the elections held in December citing manipulating results, aggressive rhetoric, verbal abuse, and Russian media actively engaging in disinformation on behalf of the government. Serbia has aligned itself with Russia. It is the only European country, except for Belarus, not to impose sanctions following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And it acts as the Kremlin Trojan horse in southeastern Europe in a geopolitical war against the democratic world. When I was a political prisoner in Serbia at the age of 24 for 2 years and 7 months, I heard the guards